All right, round two, meeting, work session, Anchorage Assembly. You can go around again, starting with you, Ms. Tucker. We're on the record now.
Thank you. Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Amy DeBoski.
Patrick Flynn.
Jennifer Johnston.
Tim Steele.
Big training.
L.D. Gray Jackson.
Adam Trombley. Chris Birch.
George Michaelis.
Lance Wilbur.
Jim Bignola.
Chris Boucher.
Okay.
Janet Bittmeyer with Health.
There you go.
Well, you guys,
No, that's not
Steve.
enough. I'll call him up and we'll.
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Okay, so the Assembly called this work session. So what I thought we'd do is go ahead and just start off with transit, let them go through what they're proposing for increases, and you can answer the question, you can ask the questions, you know, as if there's any. I think you all have a handout from transit right now in front of you. Okay, you're getting a handout. Is everybody having it? And then, as we go through this department, I'll call another department and then we'll go through that one, just go right through it. All right.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I've prepared some slides here, and I'll go through kind of the highlights of the proposed fare change with the Assembly. We've received a couple questions, and hopefully you've been able to review the response of those. I'll try to keep my presentation to about 10 or 12 minutes, and so the other departments have ample time. So we've got a handout here. I'm going to just kind of run over, in principle, why we are proposing this fare, where the fares would be allocated to, and the difference that it would be in this new proposal, and really, frankly, how we compare to other jurisdictions with fares like ours. So the first slide is a slide that should look pretty familiar to you. It's a slide that I believe the CFO shared with you in the original budget presentation. It's just a reminder. The proposed fare increase with the new fares, we would use those resources for two purposes. One is to support the existing system, and the other is to provide some expanded service to the routes that we already have. We wouldn't be proposing any brand new routes. The fares, the regular cash fares have not been adjusted for 8 years. We've made some adjustments in 2011 to some groups fares, but they were pretty minor as well. The cost of what our costs have gone up since that time. And the one example that I take, you could take labor, you could take a variety of, but just our fuel since 2005 is $1 million more every year than it was when we last really set these fares. So it's an additional expense. Based on the estimated ridership, based on the ridership we have, the ridership we will have, if this proposed fare structure is implemented, we estimate about a $600,000 increase in our total revenue coming in. So the next slide is kind of really four highlights from a department's perspective I want to share with the Assembly. The first one has to do with the equity in these fares. From a department's perspective, and we visited with the Transit Advisory Board, we don't have a dollar target in mind that we are trying to reach. We really looked at the fare structure that we have and compared that to other jurisdictions. I mean, is our fares too low, are our fares too high, and compare that to the service that we have. We also looked at, and I'll share a little bit more detail, looked at our ridership, look who's contributing to the revenues based on that ridership, and is one particular group contributing more or disproportionately less than the other. Adjusting the fares is hard. There's no doubt about it. We've been working on it for a long time. There's a lot of individuals ride our bus. We carry 14,000 people a day, 4 million people a year. So that's a lot of individuals. We don't take this lightheartedly. We put a lot of thought into it. So, and I know that if there's information here that you need, we'll share that with you. If there's something that you don't have, let me know. I have visited with the Senior Commission, Senior Citizen Advisory Commission, the Veterans Commission, and the ADA Commission. They all have been briefed similar to what I'm going to share with you right now. Last year, when we looked at this, we did a fare equity analysis that's required by the Federal Transit Administration to make sure that we're not targeting a particular route disproportionately, a particular income disproportionately, a part of town disproportionately. This fare, new fare, would be applied equally among all parts of town where we currently provide that service. If we are successful in the proposed fares, the department's recommendation is to provide additional service to the Route 75. we have a plan that we created back in 2009, and we are strategically going through implementing the priority recommendations. The priority recommendations are for those routes that are not on 30-minute headways. We want to advance them to basically a bus every 30 minutes. We have some routes like that, but the Route 75 is not one of those. The Route 75 goes from downtown through Midtown to the VA clinic and back. It stops to Cottonwood, stops all the way around. So it really makes a nice a loop there. The bus is full. I mean, during the peak hours particularly, it's full. So we would add more service during the weekday to 6 p.m. and run a bus every 30 minutes. The Route 1, the Route 2 are pretty close. For those of you who are your constituents, when we made the adjustments in August, we added more service to the 45 already. We made some adjustments to the Route 8, so I think we've accommodated some of those.
Mr. Wilbur?
Yep.
It's gonna kind of be a dialogue as
Sure.
as well, so Ms. Gray Jackson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and you mentioned additional service on Route 75.
Correct.
Is that going to include service to Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center?
No.
No. Why not?
Well, we would have to, this proposal is based on staying the existing route. We did not put together a proposal that would deviate the route to the clinic from a department's perspective.
Okay.
We could-
I know you didn't, but why not, considering the situation that we've been talking about for several years now? And this was the route that would have been able to service Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center. So I'm curious.
If we were to deviate that, based on the, based on, if memory serves, with 30-minute headways on the existing route, just to deviate that 2 miles to the clinic and back would be $150,000. So we did not include that in this
Right,
proposal.
and just one more comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I
Yes.
just think it would have been a really good idea if you had done that. I'd be a whole lot happier with this whole increase if that was done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steele?
Is there another route that's more likely or that could service that area? That's a real hole in the
I
system.
appreciate the importance of this topic. Can we stick to the budget aspects? Because we have a lot to get through today.
All right. Save that question.
One of the points I want to bring to your attention is maintain, it says class pass, it's a group pass. Since this ordinance was proposed, we've heard some comments from folks at Campfire and many of the folks at the school district, and one of the recommendations in the omnibus is to delete that group pass, particularly for summer use. We would recommend you keep it. We met with them. We suggested, we were having some problems with it. So on page 6 of the ordinance, 6 of 28, there's a recommendation for group passes in the summer. We just asked that we put that back in. We talked to them about increasing that slightly, and they were supportive of that as well. So that's one change that we would encourage with this proposed fare change. This last one here is substitution, not a solution. From a department's perspective, again, when we start off, we want to provide equity in the system. Changing using these fares to basically do two things: support the existing system that we have with the tax dollars we have, and have the folks that are riding the service, using the service, pay a portion to that service, seems fair. If it's just all tax support, I mean, if the issue is just to get us $600,000 and it's just to bring $600,000, someone else is going to have. So substituting with a different color of money or different kind of money, I just think it's just kicking it down the road. I mean, this issue is not going to, this issue of equity is not going to go away. So, some information on slide 4. This is, you should on the far left-hand side, you should see ridership, then in the middle, revenue, and then the next one is the proposed fare. The first column breaks down our current revenue. Our current ridership. 62% of the people that we have, so I'm looking at the one that says proportional of ridership to revenue share. 62% of the people that are on our bus are adults paying that adult fare. 23% are seniors paying that senior ADA reduced fare, and then smaller percentage youth. The top bar is when we have promotional or frankly free for seniors on Wednesdays. Does not include. What you see on the next slide is who's contributing based on the proportion of ridership. So, for example, 62% of the riders are adults. They're contributing 80% of the revenue. Likewise, 23% of them are riders of seniors, and they're contributing 11% into the fare revenue. The proposed structure would adjust that slightly. The ridership would still be 62% adults, but under the new fare structure, the adults will be contributing 76%, and the seniors would be contributing 15%. It's a 4% difference in the fare structure. So the adults would be contributing 4% less, the seniors 4% more. That's that graphic. If you're interested in the money, go to the next slide. We're looking at the ridership and how much money each group participates. I won't go into much detail on this one, but it's pretty much the same metric. You can see that shift in the amount of money coming from one group to another. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes?
I thought I asked a question before, I didn't see it in the answer that you guys sent to us. I would like to see the amount of revenue associated with each fare adjustment.
Okay.
So for example, if.
Yes.
Okay, you got it?
Yep.
I'm sure you have that math behind this slide somewhere, so.
Okay. I will get that for you. So the next two slides, this one here is an average comparison of 6 categories of trips. So basically the adult cash, the reduced or the senior, and then the youth, the adult day pass, the youth or reduced day pass, and the youth. So right now, our current fares are below average in every category, in every single one of them. Now, with the proposed fare increase and combined, we would be about 5% above the average in the group. But you also have to recognize that our cost of doing business is about 18 to 20% more than these averages. So that's an important thing that we look at when we're making these recommendations. And then the last page is just kind of a breakdown on the burden to how our revenues come in and where those dollars would be separated. So on the left is just looking at our revenue, where our monies come from. 58% from taxes, 16% from fares, 23% from grants. With the proposed fare, the tax amount goes down by a percentage. The fares go up by 3%, just 3%. So again, that's the money we would use for the fares to support the existing service, which is currently a lot supported by taxes, and we will provide more service, and then the folks benefiting from the service would contribute. So it's pretty brief. There's a lot of facts behind it, a lot of details. Answer any questions that you might have.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lance, how much of the $600,000 would be for the senior increase in all 3 categories? What's the total?
So in the first year, it would be about $240,000 of the 600. The adults, so if there's a $600,000, just the first year, if you're just looking at the 600,000, the adults, $300,000, half of it. They're making up half of the proposed 600. The seniors, $240,000, and the youth, about $50,000 to $60,000.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. You said the first year. What about out years?
So in the out years, what we did is, that is the slide that I tried to show the overall proportional, in the slide where it says, if you look at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the 4th slide. What I did, Ms. Gray Jackson, and this is the one with the ridership column, the revenue currently in the out year. Right now, the seniors and ADA provide 11% of $4 million. That's about our revenue target. After the fares, at the end of 2013, they would be contributing roughly 15% of the new total. So does that answer your question?
No. I just need a number for, you said for 2014 it's 240,000.
Right.
Okay.
So
Let's say how much is it going to be in 2015?
it will be the same.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnson?
This really isn't about this, but it kind of is. The transit center in Midtown is one of the capital priorities.
Right.
And have you, in working on that, developed route schedules and efficiencies if we ever got that, as
Yeah.
far as supporting. I think that'd be important to do, because as we look at this, and we understand some of the inefficiencies, if there's added efficiencies, that maybe we could serve some of these communities.
I would agree, but without a specific site, to do a route analysis without a specific site or where that site would be, other than, in Midtown. But Ms. Johnson, as I mentioned, we have a plan to recommend adding 30-minute headways to all our routes that don't have it, not just the 75. So, agreed, efficiencies in Midtown would bring efficiencies in the systems with the money we have. We would then be able to add more headways. Same thing with the data center. Make some adjustments down there.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur.
Thank you.
Okay, next is fire.
Andrew Nolan's my Deputy Chief of Operations, and he's going to be leading our charge in this. You've already got it.
Thank you.
We have even color that has to do with what-
Fine with me.
Good afternoon. As you know, we're proposing to increase the ambulance fees by $300. I know that seems like a substantial amount, but hopefully when we get done with this, I'll be able to express why we think it's reasonable and why we should move forward and at least considering this. The proposed $300 fee is recommended to help improve cost recovery and reduce taxpayer subsidy. Currently, we're only collecting about 45% of our direct costs related to any ambulance fees that are associated out there. Now, there's a few varying factors for that, and as you can see on the table that's provided with you, it was in your packets originally, but it's on the very last page. It shows the revenue versus direct costs from 2001 to 2012. The reason why we went back to 2001 is because fees for residents of Anchorage have not increased since 2001. Now, in 2009, there were fee increases specifically for non-residents, and that was, I believe, by about $100 compared to the actual numbers that were there. On page 2, it actually outlines what those increases look like compared to resident and non-resident, and then BLS and ALS care as well, 2 different fees. Since 2002, cost for emergency medical service has increased over 127%. For us, when you look at direct costs, these fees, these extra fees, this extra $300 will increase our annual revenue by about $1.5 million. Get us back up. The second page again is just the fare types and the current rates versus the proposed for residents and non-residents. And on the last page, we go through and talk about some of the reasons backing the decision why we're raising it by $300. Basically, there was a median, the median EMS recoverable fees via insurance is about $1,000 per the Wilson Agency, which is an industry expert located here in Anchorage. That's excluding muni claims. If you actually included the municipal claims, what we charge is so much lower, it actually decreases that number from $1,000 to just over $800 alone. So one of the pages you have there shows the comparables with other agencies, like-sized agencies out there, including some of our local ones around the state, from private ambulance service, from LifeMed, which charges roughly $1,300 per transport for ALS, down to $1,200 for BLS transports. We also include Mat-Su Borough, Fairbanks, North Star Borough, and Capital City, which is Juneau, to show other comparables, along with other like sizes across the country. Our costs are low. The fees we're charging right now are extremely low when you look at the comparables. When you look at the costs and how much and what we've done to figure those rates in, we also include the uncollected in our calculations. We also include the uncollected revenue that you just can't collect. We may charge $850 for an MOA resident for ALS services, but for Medicare and Medicaid, they only allow us to collect so much out of that. So those revenues are taken out of there as loss, but also there's the private insurance that's out there. And those uncollectibles, there's just certain amounts that are out there that are uncollectible. And those get sent to collection agencies, but still there's a certain amount that you just end up writing off at the end of the year that are just uncollectible. So those calculations are taken into consideration when we look at the total revenue that we're gonna increase annually.
Mr. Burke?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, are you done?
Yeah.
Just had a couple of questions. One, that since, on the first slide, since 2002, cost for EMS services have increased 127. Is that a full, I mean, is that the full range of costs? Is that labor, materials, equipment?
Yeah, those are direct costs. So in your handout there on table, I believe it's labeled as table 1, it shows you the actual direct cost versus revenue collected. And that is everything. Direct cost is labor, drugs, medicine, fuel, tires, maintenance, all of those things.
And second question, as it relates to, it's been my experience when an ambulance rolls, there's more than at least another fire truck, and, I mean, it seems like there's a whole fleet that shows up with the ambulance. Does this just address the cost of rolling the ambulance, or?
Yes.
It does, so it doesn't really address the associated cost,
The
if you
associated
will.
cost of the other, yeah, the closer units that show up
What
first.
what it addresses is the transport, the actual transport of the patient. Whether there's 2 or 3 vehicles that show up on the site, that's immaterial, it's not immaterial, but
Yeah.
it's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is the transport fee itself.
Because there are a lot of times we'll respond and the patient ends up going on their own accord through, someone ends up taking them in, or there's actually not the emergency that was initially, we were dispatched for, and you arrive there and realize there is an emergency, so we'll respond and not actually transport, so.
So if there's no transport, there's no charge?
Transport, there's no charge.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Training?
What's the total dollar amount on the bad debt write-off every year?
Total dollar amount of bad debt every year. I believe it is around 42% of our revenue.
In dollar amount, how much?
In dollar amounts is $5.7 million.
We write off every year?
I'm sorry, how much did you say? 5?
Let me make sure I have my numbers correct. Current rates,
Is that 5.7 million?
total transportation revenue, total projected from billing, yeah,
In the neighborhood of
in the neighborhood of 5.7 million.
million. That's a lot of money. Thank you, sir.
And there's, they transport a lot of folks that don't have insurance. So.
Is that all, Mr. Training?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston?
That answer, now I forgot my question. Oh, I know my question. Does this have any effect on the volunteer fire departments that you guys are doing?
No. Overall, our billing rates are set and they have their own, Girdwood follows right in line with what we do here within Anchorage Bowl, and Chugach has their own exceptions.
So their fees will increase proportionally?
Oh, yes, their fees will increase proportionally.
Because they
Remember that, when you look at that last page of cost recovery, it talks about typically insurance companies cover about 80% of all ambulance costs. So of those with private insurance, typically 80% of that is directly recoverable and easy to get because insurance is going to pay for that. It's usually that 20% that's left out there that you have to go after, potentially have to go out to collections and stuff, so.
So are the volunteer fire departments, when we raise, do they raise it voluntarily, or are they, because of our relationship?
Because of our relationship with them.
They have to do what we do,
Mhm.
even though it's a different service area.
Plus, ambulance coverage is an area line. So.
So their fees go up. Chugach has the exception. I believe the exception is that they will pay no more than what insurance allows,
Yeah.
or what insurance will bill them at 80%. I believe the rest is written off by the agency.
Is that all, Ms. Johnson? Mr. Boston?
Thank you. Jennifer asked some of what I was going to talk about, but Mr. Michaelis, I would like a written response from the administration as far as the impact to the Chugia Volunteer Fire Department with this fee increase, because I know the Board of Supervisors is very concerned. Following up on that, has the Board of Supervisors for Chugiak or Girdwood been, have they taken any position or any discussion with them on this issue?
I've talked with the GDIAC Board of Supervisors, but not down at Group.
And what was that conversation like?
It was actually just in passing that we were looking at raising our fees.
Okay, so you don't know of any formal position they've taken? Okay, thank you. And then, I have another question, I think I lost it. Oh, since we're talking about bad debt, like write-off, have there been any improvements in your collections for AFD?
Have there been any improvements in our collection for AFD? Yes, is the short answer. The little bit longer answer is it's not been what we'd like. It's not been what we want, but it is what it is. We went to a different, essentially billing agency, and their collection rate has not been what we'd like it to be. There's definitely been a marked improvement. We've been holding their hands and stringing them along and training them and helping them, doing everything we can, but it's still not where it should be, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michaelis, would you follow up too and just kind of give us an update in writing on, you know, the improvements that have been made and where we're at? Thank you.
Mr. Attorney.
Mr. Michaelis, do we go after their PFD
We can.
for the 5.7?
We have the ability to do that.
I would like to see if we have a
It takes
policy.
a court order to do that.
George, I'd like to see if we have a policy to do that, because $5.7 million is a lot of money to lose every year on this. It's a vital service, but we do need to recover the money on it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, next up is planning, community planning and development.
We're working off the exhibit that was part of the assembly packet. It's Exhibit 4 for the department. We're not proposing any fee increases in the building side, the building permit fees, the 181 fund. These are all out of the 101 fund. Basically, it's about $163,000 in a projected additional revenue for fees that would come from on-site services, right-of-way, and planning. On-site services issues the septic permits, wells reviews, and the COSAs that last adjusted in 2009, we're adjusting about 7.4% for CPI. Right-of-way and planning, the CPI's been about 24% since the fees were last adjusted. We're proposing about 12.5%. On the table, you can see that what we're trying to do is reduce the taxpayer subsidy to these permitting processes that over time they've crept up, and basically we're trying to reduce that subsidy by the general taxpayer. That is pretty much it. You might look at that right-of-way table to question why the significant increase in total functional costs. We looked at that, basically a substantial portion that had to do $400,000 increase in personnel, $100,000 for the Hanson product, about $276,000 in increased IGCs. Otherwise, current planning pretty much remained fairly stable, other than the fees. Revenues are decreasing significantly. We've had a volume year this year. I don't know how many of you have seen any of the information, but we're probably going to finish the end of the year for the department about $570 million in valuations and permitting, which traditionally for the past 3 or 4 years has been about $450. So there's been significant increased activity in the development side.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Next is the health department.
I'm going to defer to Deputy Steve Morris.
Good afternoon, my name is Steve Morris, and I'll just be giving a brief overview of our proposed fee increases. I'll start with the food facility fees. The last time that fees were increased in the food permitting area, it was in 2009. And between 2009 and 2013, the CPI went up about 10% in Anchorage. And historically, we've attempted to recover the bulk of the cost of the program through these permit fees. Back in 2009, we recovered about 92% of direct costs from the permitting fees. Right now, it's down to about 85%, so we've lost some ground. So essentially, we've made some minor tweaks to the permitting fees for the food facilities, roughly in accordance with the CPI. And we're expecting to recover about an additional $40,000 from the permit fees. And if the permit fee goes through, we expect that the amount of fee-supported direct costs will be about 90%. So we'll be about where we were back in 2009. So the idea basically is just to keep pace with the CPI and the fees. Of course, we've had increases in the cost of staff and other costs as well. So basically, just keeping pace with the costs. The noise permit fees, the last time they were amended was 2003. So it's been a decade since they adjusted. We did a cost analysis to look at how much staff time is put into the permitting of these noise events and also the monitoring of them. Sometimes when we issue permits, we have to make sure that there is compliance with the conditions of the permit, so that requires an inspector to go out and measure noise and make sure they're complying, or if they are required to quit the event at 10 o'clock at night, they are in fact quitting at 10 o'clock, so sometimes there's overtime involved. So they looked at the real costs that are in real staff time that's involved and adjusted the fees accordingly. But again, it's been 10 years since those fees have been adjusted. So some of the fees you'll see for the noise are fairly significant increases, but again, those are reflective of what we see as the real costs.
Mr. Birch?
What are the most frequent applicants for a noise permit?
Well, I should have said that typically for a single event, a charity event, they have amplified fun run or something like that. Many of those those probably make up the bulk number of the fees, but we're not actually proposing any fee increases. We actually want to encourage those people to come in and get a permit, and so we didn't propose any fee increases there. But aside from those, the most common ones probably construction-related permits, that sort of thing. People coming in for road construction. They may want a variance to work on the weekend if it's private construction, that kind of thing. Those are the typical permits that we get.
And catering permits, right? Outside vendors, like the bars opening and closing down streets.
Right. Well, the noise permits downtown often, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland?
Do we have any fees associated with mobile food carts?
Yes.
What's the fee for that operation?
On page 10.
Can we get back to you with that?
Yeah, I'd just like to know what the rate structure is for the mobile food carts, if you would. Thank you, sir. Just get back to me on it.
There's no other questions? Okay.
Next up is the library.
Thank you, Steve. It's all yours.
Okay, this is a proposal to increase our meeting room rates. We haven't increased them for about 8 years. We currently have the Assembly, Marston Theater, Public Conference Room, and Stevens. We had not been renting some of our meeting rooms in the branches, and with this proposal, we've kind of changed some of the rooms in the branches, and we'll be leasing those out. We brought this to the Library Advisory Board in May of this year, and they did approve it, so you are the next step. Currently, the Marston Theater, for example, has pretty inferior equipment. We're going to work to update that equipment this year. So that will, we feel, can justify. We kind of wanted to wait for that to happen to increase the rates. We are under market rate. The points for this, we're under market rate. We want to improve the access. We're also including the grounds around the library. There are folks that rent both Ann Stevens and the Green for special events, like weddings, and this is also a plan to increase the marketing. We've added a brochure, and we'll really work to improve.
Mrs. Graves Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The table, for me at least, is a little bit confusing. Let's start with assembly. Present for nonprofit 110, proposed 2014-65. Do you mean an additional $65? And then you have present for, well, let's go back to what I just said. Is that an additional 110 plus an additional 65?
No, sorry, it's was, for the assembly, use that as an example, it's currently $65. We are proposing to increase it to 110 for nonprofit.
I think your
Yeah.
headers are.
Yes, the
Oh, the
headers
headers are
are
wrong.
wrong.
Uh-oh.
You got them switched.
Sorry. Yeah, gosh.
I was confused too.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
proposed
Sorry.
should,
Thank
yeah,
you, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you for that.
Mr. Flynn.
Well, that was the
Yeah,
first one
sorry.
that I had. The second question, it looks like because when you do a repeal and reenact, I can never tell what's changing. Are there any other changes like, late fees or lost materials?
You know, we aren't. Those fees, we are projecting increased revenue from those fees next year.
But you're not changing them?
But we haven't changed them, no. They were changed prior to my coming
Yeah, I remember.
fairly substantially. They're pretty high, actually.
I know.
Love to reduce them.
Ms. Novosky, did you have a question? No.
Okay, that
Thank you.
concludes all of the departments that have leave.
You need assembly comments?
I would just say that since I was probably a little bit curt in curbing Mr. Steele's question and then bewildered, there's still time if he wants to bring it back up here, even though he's hiding it back and hoping to see
Mr. Steele, would you like to?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right, then we are adjourned.
Thanks, Lynn.